Well, good evening. It is evening here in Australia. I've set up a little bit of an impromptu studio here, some plastic flowers, everything's fake. Some plastic flowers. This is where we do our, this room is the session room where we do our meditative practices at Avatar Country Day Spa. Not always, sometimes up on the yoga deck, up on the top of the hill. Things like that, but I thought it's nice and quiet here away from everything. So what I wanted to do in this video was not the first 50 lessons, but an introduction to the first 50 lessons for anyone who doesn't really know what A Course in Miracles is or what it's about, etc. Because I'm aware that there's a lot of people on my social media page and in various groups who are just very, very new to the idea of transforming the mind and finding a reconnective modality wherein they can come to know themselves as they were created by God or by universal mind as whole and perfect, right? Which in this world, that seems that you're anything but. We always seems to have an idea of ourselves as I'm never going to be perfect, etc. Right? But as you'll come to learn through the undoing and the redoing of your mind in practicing the lessons in the workbook of A Course in Miracles, that there are two ways to see yourself. One is true and one is a complete fabrication. So just before we start, I've got some here. There's another one there. If you want just a basic little introduction, if you are very, very new or you've never heard of A Course in Miracles, we give out these little booklets. This one I've got very few left, but it's been replaced by this one with a more exciting cover. This one I produced with more of an intention to make available locally in our community, because it was revealed a couple of years ago that we have the highest rate of suicide per head of people anywhere in our country, in Australia, which I thought was quite alarming. So I tailor-made this one specifically for people who were feeling the pains of suicidal thoughts or feeling depressed, etc., etc. So there's a little introductory bit in the beginning that just sort of covers that, and then it gets into the main body of the work, which is the reviews of the first 50 lessons of A Course in Miracles. This one is just the reviews. It doesn't have the little preamble of all the other bits. But if you like these little books, you can just inbox me or contact me wherever you're watching this video, and I'll mail one out to you. If you're international, I'll probably mail you half a dozen, and you can send me a replied post, a self-addressed envelope, whatever. So, A Course in Miracles, I'm not going to get into the story, how it came and everything. Tomorrow, I've got Chris from the Thetford Foundation staying with me at the moment, and we're going to make a bit of a video together to just explain more for the purposes of alleviating some of the confusion that's reigning at the moment online with the course community in general about origins of the sparkly book, which is this one, and what's the white book about, which is this one. And most people probably have the old blue book, which is published by Foundation for Inner Peace. Now, it doesn't really matter what book you have. The workbook is identical in all of them, right? And Chris will explain what the differences are and why this book came into being tomorrow when I interview him. And if you look on my Facebook page, Dave Phare, Phare, Dave, you'll find a little video where, I think it's a video or a post I've put up, about how this came into being, how I heard or was given a vision from Jesus, and there it is. Right, it's actually in two parts, the white edition. That's part B, which is the workbook and teacher's manual. Part A, which is, and they're quite chunky compared to the whole thing, like, look at that. It's 2 volumes, but the sparkly book is very thin biblical style paper. This is just like normal A4. So I'm hoping to be able to present this in a more user-friendly format, down the track. But for now, that's it. So it took enough to get that out. But so A Course in Miracles, mind training modality, and we'll probably just go from the sparkly book at the moment. But the workbook lessons are designed to undo the way you think you think. Right, so if you're all tangled up in the world and you've got grievances, problems, you can't get out of the past and you're constantly worried about the future and everything, it's probably time to start what most people term as your spiritual journey. Right? You're on it already, whether you're aware of it or not, but actually choosing to become consciously engaged in it and to participate in a, what would you call it? A curriculum that leaves no room for error, that is so uncompromising, such as this book. Millions of people around the world that have picked this up have gone, oh my fucking God, where has this been all my life? And just as many have probably picked it up and go, no, it's not for me, and thrown it away. Which was one of my earlier reactions to it. It was just too much. I couldn't let it in. But having had many experiences, spiritual experiences, as you should have if you do the workbook lessons correctly, I cannot deny the truth of the words that are written on these pages and what they point at in as a alternative for daily living, if you like, or daily thinking and therefore living, etc. So I wanted to do the first 50 lessons in this video format, just read it out aloud, and we'll go through the application of the lesson, because I get a lot of people, I've been doing this since 1997, I've had a conscious connection with this book every day it's been in my life, and I've referred it to people, I've lost track how many times, and given so many copies away and da-da-da-da-da. But one of the main things I get as feedback is, I started the workbook and I got to lesson 10 or lesson 20 and then I got busy and I just had to put it down and da-da-da. And it seems to be a common thing that people don't tend to get through the first 50 lessons. Now, the first 50 lessons are the whole thought system of the course in a nutshell, right? And if you were to read just this little book, the reviews of the first 50 lessons, which is also contained after the 50th lesson of this book, in this book, it'll take you through the entire philosophical and theoretical kind of thought system, wherein then you begin to apply the principles of those lessons to the situations of your daily life in order to effect changes in your thinking and therefore in the relationships that show up for you out in the world. And at first, it's a lot to get through. It's very wordy. It's very heavy conceptually. And I found for myself anyway that there was a period of a number of years where it took me 2-3 years to really master, or felt like I had a grip on the concepts. And I actually had to do the workbook twice. The first year I realised at about lesson 280 or 320 or something that my integrity for doing the lessons was lacking. And I forget what it was. It was something in one of the lessons just made me realise how full of shit I was. And I decided January the 1st I would go back and do it all again, and this time with a lot more integrity and devotion to self. And the results were profoundly different. All right, so one of the things, and I'll make a biblical reference here before I start, one of the things that I really like, if you're a biblical person and you haven't read this, I highly recommend grab yourself a copy and just read it, and you'll just be gobsmacked. If you're in tune with the New Testament, you'll be absolutely gobsmacked how it expands it out. Just, it's mind-blowing. And if you've been trying to read the Bible and like me, you couldn't make sense of it, have a crack at this and then go back to the Bible and you'll be like, wow, it's so easy to read. Right? It just expands it out. In here, it covers a lot of the mistakes that were written in the early Bible. And for anyone who doesn't know, there we go. That's the author. Believe it or not. Right? It's probably going to be the hardest thing that you'll have to believe is that this book was channeled. Right? So this book was channeled over a period of about 10 years from 1965 to 75 through a woman in America who was a clinical psychologist, and in collaboration with her partner. But that's what happened. So, and tomorrow it'll be exciting talking to Chris, because he's an older gent than myself, and was actually around at the time it all came into being, and had a lot of contact with people like Ken Wapnick and due to scutch and all of that sort of thing. And he was directly involved in the court case where the copyright was taken off A Course in Miracles, and this was allowed to be published without all the editing that was done in the earlier edition. And anyone who's familiar with that editing will realise, I think 60, 70, 80 pages worth of information and text was removed. And we'll probably go into that a little bit tomorrow. I don't want to get into that now, but Christopher's an incredible source of stories and information about all that if you're interested in that. So rather than start on lesson 1 today, I'm going to read the introduction to the workbook, right, which, where are we? Let me just find it here somewhere. If you don't know, if you don't have a copy of the course, and actually I'll bump into people all the time who go, workbook? What workbook? It's kind of funny. It's half the book, you know. But it's in the middle of the book. There we go, right? So, boom, and that's in the sparkly book. And there's 365 lessons. And the start of the workbook, if I can find it, in the sparkly book, looks like that in the middle of the thing. Can you see it? A Course in Miracles workbook. So I'm just going to skip ahead. You don't need the table of contents. Introduction. All right, I'll read the introduction and then you'll start to get a sense of what you're putting yourself in for. Right? What kind of driver's seat you're getting behind. All right, bear with me. A theoretical foundation such as the text, which is this section, is necessary as a background to make these exercises meaningful. Yet it is the exercises which will make the goal possible. Now, the goal of this course is inner peace, which will hopefully lead you to revelation, etc., etc. Yet it is the exercises which will make the goal possible. An untrained mind can accomplish nothing. It is the purpose of these exercises to train the mind to think along the lines which the course sets forth. The exercises are very simple. They do not require more than a few minutes, and it does not matter where or when you do them. They need no preparation. They are numbered running from 1 to 365. The training period is 1 year. Do not undertake more than one exercise a day. Now, if Jesus is telling you that, right, this guy, you'd be unwise not to listen, right, or wise to listen. The purpose of the exercises is to train the mind to a different perception of everything in the world. The workbook is divided into 2 sections, the first dealing with the undoing of what you see now, and the second with the restoration of sight. It is recommended that each exercise be repeated several times a day, preferably in a different place each time, and if possible, in every situation in which you spend any long period of time. The purpose is to train the mind to generalize the lessons so that you will understand that each of them is as applicable to one situation as it is to another. Unless specified to the contrary, the exercises should be practiced with the eyes open, since the aim is to learn how to see. The only rule that should be followed throughout is to practice the exercises with great specificity. So, where am I? Specificity. Each one, right, this is really uncompromising. I love this stuff. Each one applies to every situation in which you find yourself and to everything you see in it. It's like you can ask yourself, how is that fucking possible? How does the guy that's written this book or the person telling me this in this book know what the hell I'm doing each day, right? Each day's exercises are planned around one central idea. The exercises themselves consisting of applying that idea to as many specifics as possible. Be sure that you do not decide that there are some things you see to which the idea for the day is inapplicable. The aim of the exercises will always be to increase the application of the idea to everything. This will not require effort. Only be sure that you make no exceptions in applying the idea. Some of the ideas, this is the best bit, I love this bit in the introduction, ready? Some of the ideas I think all the fucking ideas, when you're new to it anyway. Some of the ideas you will find hard to believe, and others will seem quite startling. It does not matter. You are merely asked to apply them to what you see. You are not asked to judge them, nor even to believe them. You don't even have to believe them. How's that? I don't believe it. You don't even have to believe them. You are asked only to use them. It is their use which will give them meaning to you and show you they are true. Remember only this: you need not believe them, you need not accept them, and you need not welcome them. Some of them you may actively resist. None of this will matter nor decrease their efficacy. But allow yourself to make no exceptions in applying the ideas the exercises contain. Whatever your reactions to the ideas may be, use them. Nothing more than this is required. End of introduction. And then we go on to lesson 1, which is nothing I see means anything. Which, if you could get that one lesson, that's the whole workbook, really. That's the whole thing. But there's 365 lessons because... the first half of the workbook is the undoing of the way you see. The second half, the restoration of sight. So many lessons because we are such complicated little beings and we can't just, So 360, it's like How to Find God for Dummies. I don't know if anyone's ever read that book. But this is what this is. I'm the only thing that doesn't know what it is, so I need 365 lessons. A tree knows what it is. Those plastic flowers know what they are. Those ones too. Everything knows what it is except for a human being. What am I? Where is, what's the meaning of life? So, all right, that's it for today. And let that sink in. It's going to be a very uncompromising journey. The first 50 lessons of A Course in Miracles. And we'll start off with lesson 1 tomorrow. Nothing I see means anything. All right, I love you. And I'm going to go have some dinner. Peace.